Now doing that, so we are recording.
I just want to check. I'm seeing her PowerPoint still, so I don't know if she's trying to show her, or maybe I'm just not seeing what's.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
no.
Hold
Yeah,
on.
I see your PowerPoint too still.
You know what? That's because I have it shared to the wrong thing. Okay, so I'm just going to share my entire screen for now. And then I'm going to go to, no, not that. Hold on. Sorry, it's like you said record and I immediately failed at everything. Oh Lord, tell me I didn't actually X out of my check. I'm hoping that also my audio is coming through. I just clicked share screen, so I'm just hoping. Sorry, I'm now extremely flustered. So just confirm for me right now, can you actually see a video loaded up with some drawings and stuff?
Yep.
Okay, so my name is Carly Tribble, and I'm coming to you from Farmingdale State College, which is part of the SUNY system. And one of the things that I've been exploring as I've been moving online is actually moving away from pre-recorded PowerPoints into what I'm hoping is a somewhat more dynamic system. So what I'm going to share with you right now is a little bit of a video that I've been producing. So I'm going to go ahead and click play, and hopefully audio comes through. Are we hearing anything?
No. Sorry. If you exit out of the share, and then when you hit that share screen button, at the bottom of the screen, you should see two little check buttons that say
I see.
share my
computer sound. Yeah.
Yep. Then
Sorry, my school has done the what? Luckily, this is all asterisks. Okay. So, and now it's telling me it doesn't want to use my microphone.
I can hear you fine.
Oh, well.
So yeah, it sounds fine. So just try playing that and see what we hear.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try to play this.
Yep.
And shopping at the grocery store, chopping and prepping food, cooking it, and preparing a meal for yourself or others. I like to think that I would spend more time drawing comics, but who knows? It's a non-issue because humans, like all animals, lack the ability to photosynthesize. It's a superpower that is found within the plants and some specialized bacteria and protists. This is oversimplifying a little bit, but that sugar will eventually be in the form of glucose. And this is really why we call plants producers and animals consumers. Plants can form glucose from materials that are... Okay, so I'm obviously not going to spend the whole time playing this entire video, but I'm going to hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of what I'm getting at. And so now I'm just going to go ahead and share my regular PowerPoint. The funny thing about this is my school has effectively banned banned Zoom. So I have completely forgotten how to use Zoom because we're not allowed to use it at my school. So hopefully now, can you guys confirm that you are seeing my PowerPoint? Very good.
Yep, good.
So like I said, I'm from Farmingdale State College, and I have been producing these videos in which I'm trying to move away from sort of what we consider the standard voice over PowerPoint recording. And you just saw a little bit of that video in sort of what I've been producing for my school and producing for my own set of lectures and putting online in a public format. And they're these sort of animated and drawn videos that I've been making. So a little bit of an outline of how this talk is going to go, since it is a somewhat longer talk. I'll start with a little bit about me and my sort of call for asynchronous learning, thinking critically about why we use these voice over slide deck recordings, which just for clarity and brevity, I'm going to call PowerPoints, even though you might be using Google Slides, you might be using Apple's Keynote. I'm just going to broadly refer to these as PowerPoints, but I am referring to sort of this act of using slide decks that we have recorded our voices over and made videos and put them on our learning management system. I'm going to talk about how I've started to pull away from them and spend quite a bit of time on my creative and technical process just to sort of give you an overview into what goes into producing a video like that. I'll talk about the technical pitfalls, what's going to happen next, and ultimately, hopefully convince you to consider this type of programming for yourself or for your classes. So about me, I am a fourth-year assistant professor at Farmingdale State College, and my main job at Farmingdale is teaching general biology, which is what we call a non-majors biology class. So although I am a biologist, what I'm primarily teaching is this course where none of my students are intended to become biology majors. Instead, they are fulfilling a natural sciences general education course. So they aren't intending on becoming biology majors, but they need to fulfill this natural science gen ed, and biology sounds a lot less intimidating than chemistry and physics, which also offers their own natural science gen ed course. So general biology at Farmingdale is a very popular course to take if you're a history major or an English major or an art major, and you need to fulfill this natural sciences with a gen ed course. This course is essentially the same as every other general biology non-majors bio course at any other institution, which means that there's a bunch of textbooks out there, a bunch of syllabi that I can follow, and they all sort of follow the same kind of order of topics, starting out with some organic macromolecules, like what is a carbohydrate, what is a lipid, going through the organelles of the eukaryotic cell, going through photosynthesis and cellular respiration, going through genetics and inheritance, like how to make a Punnett square, going into evolution, which is my field, and natural selection, and sort of a tour of plants, animals, bacteria, and fungi, which is our biodiversity section. And then, of course, ending at a bit of ecology. So pretty standard and something that's seen throughout many, many different courses. I spend a lot of time drawing comics, which is going to play into this story about how I ended up making these animations. But you can actually see some of those comics at a website called www.biologycomics.com. I sort of lucked out in getting that name. And basically, this is an open educational resource in which I'm taking sort of my background as someone who draws comics and trying to basically make a textbook that is in a graphic novel format. So this is an OER, it's available online. This is a project that's probably going to take me somewhere between 5 and 10 years to complete. But the basic idea here is that I am going through these same topics that would be explored in one of these standard general biology textbooks. What I'm hoping is a little bit more interesting about this project that I'm making here is that it has a framing narrative. And that framing narrative is that there is this study group of these 5 students down here that are meeting every week for a study group. And in each week, you have a different study group leader. And that leader sort of pretends to be a professor, which is sort of our study group technique. And they have to explain the topic that they're assigned to the rest of the group. And so in this sort of framing narrative of having one of these 5 students lead the group and cover something like the structure of a cell, the real life reader learns about that material, and it is at the same level of detail as any other sort of non-major biology textbook. Another sort of important context about myself, which fits into this story, is that I've taught myself many things online in sort of what I think of as an asynchronous format. So to give you an idea, I've learned how to knit entirely online from YouTube videos. I've learned how to bake, certainly like every other millennial during this pandemic. I learned about sourdough baking techniques online. I've learned how to use various research software. My point is that I have learned how to do lots of stuff in sort of this semi-self-taught, semi-YouTube video fashion. And I think this is something that's very true of my generation. Now, my students on average tend to only be about 10 years younger than me. So I think they're also doing something very similar, if not doing it more, seeking third-party sources to learn about materials that they're first hearing about in class. And I know for a fact that they're doing this because they tell me. And I see this amongst all of the other biology students on my campus, is that no matter how good a professor's lecture is, my students are still going to be accessing other materials because they want to see it taught by someone else. Not because the professor is bad, but I think they get a certain level of confirmation and confidence when they see that information sort of reinforced by another format. Now, in terms of the videos that are the most common for biology students, just from sort of anecdata, just sort of surveying my students and hearing their responses, I think the Crash Course series on YouTube is one of the best and most renowned series. And certainly I've seen these videos, I've used these videos, and I know that my students are watching them. So if you've never seen these yourself before, these are just very good introductory biology videos. They have a lot of high production value. They have a lot of great sound and video work. And I know that my students are finding these videos after seeing my lectures, and I'm fine with that because much like them, I also did similar things when I was a college student. No matter how good a professor's lecture was, I would still want to see if that information was repeated in a slightly different format just to confirm what I thought was the correct information. So I think this is a pretty common practice amongst our students. So this is sort of the context I come to when March 2020 hit and we had the COVID-19 shutdown. I was already working on comics, and I personally have an illustrator's background as both a biologist and an artist. I had already started applying that artistic background to the production of open educational resource materials. I am personally influenced by online learning, both as a former student and as a current professor. And I was well aware that my students were relying on things like the Crash Course Biology series. So what I began thinking about is, as I'm sort of going into this online sort of emergency period, I began thinking about how I was going to respond as a professor for general biology. And so what I decided at that point is that the most equitable thing that I could do, both for myself and my students, is to go with an asynchronous format. And I think there's lots of different interpretations of what asynchronous versus synchronous can mean depending on your discipline. But for me, asynchronous primarily meant pre-recording all of my lectures, getting my assignments online, and allowing students the flexibility to work ahead or to pause sort of their recordings and listen to them later on. So for that emergency half of the spring 2020 semester, what I decided to do was basically record my PowerPoints the weekend before I would put them up on Sunday night. The students would have all of the week to watch those recordings. And I also put up all of my homework assignments and essentially made them available for students to start with sort of the deadlines laid out for them. And so that's what I did in the emergency half of spring 2020. But then I entered the summer of 2020. And at this point, Farmingdale had communicated to us that they were going to be primarily remote or online. And so this is something Farmingdale did really well. They communicated this to professors very early on. They did not try to make us meet in person, and they really put the safety of their staff, faculty, and students first. So I knew in the summer that my fall semester was going to be online. And at this point, I began thinking more and more about what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I think I had decided then on that fall 2020 was still going to be kind of an emergency situation where I really wanted to sort of keep with what I thought was the most equitable practice, and that was going with this online mode. So I really wanted to keep things as simple as possible, get my lectures online, get my homework assignments online, clearly communicate deadlines to my students, and try to be there in some form of format, whether that was optional sort of Q&A sessions every week or being active on Microsoft Teams. And again, as I moved into that summer period, I began thinking about my fall lectures and how I was going to sort of improve and build upon what I was already doing in terms of getting my primary educational material or my lectures online. So during the summer, I began to think critically about PowerPoints and why we use PowerPoint recordings and if we should consider using something else. And so when I thought critically about why we use them, there were a few reasons I kind of landed on. The first is that we, by and large, already have the lectures. We already have the slide decks. We already have our learning objectives, and we've designed these materials for our in-person classes. So really, it's just a matter of finding a quiet space and recording over them, saving those recordings, and putting them on our learning management systems. We're familiar with this technology. So we all probably know how to use a PowerPoint or whatever slide deck program that you like to. We've been using it for years. And even when there's new updates and sort of new gadgets that you can do with the PowerPoints, it's still pretty familiar technology. And then third, I think students expect us to use them. You know, every semester I get emails from students asking them, hey, are you going to post the slides? Are you going to share the PowerPoint? So I think our students expect it, and it's a little eyebrow raising to them when we don't use them. There were some reasons why I thought about why we should consider using something else, doing something else that isn't just pre-recorded PowerPoint videos. And I think part of the reason I thought about that is because, one, recorded PowerPoints are long. They were designed for my 75-minute classes, and so they have a lot of fluff built into them, a lot of discussion and debate, a lot of questions I want to ask my in-person students, a lot of anecdotes to sort of give more content during that 75-minute time frame. I also think that recorded PowerPoints are kind of boring looking. You know, you have a bunch of text, sometimes you have an explanatory image, and it's something that we all sort of came of age with in my generation as a professor. And it's something that I still use today as a conference presenter. I'm doing it right now, in fact. But I think for our students, you know, the idea of watching several hours worth of recorded PowerPoint lectures gets a little monotonous for them because they haven't really signed up for that. And I think really taking this sort of emergency period in which there is a lot of stress and using that to reflect on our materials is something that we should be doing. Another thing that I think is kind of the elephant in the room that many professors ignore is that many of our PowerPoint recordings have copyrighted materials in them. I think it's fairly common practice that when professors are making their PowerPoints for the first time, they'll often go onto Google image search and just find the diagram or the picture that best explains their ideas. No one ever really thinks about it because you're presenting to your classes and you're just kind of assuming that there are no copyright lawyers in the room. But I think when you're starting to pre-record those things, put them online, store them either in your learning management system, or even worse, putting them on YouTube, you kind of have to be aware that you might be breaking some copyright laws, and that's something you should certainly be paying attention to. Now, you could get into the debate about whether or not we should be lecturing in the first place, and I think there's a lot of sort of new professors that are anti-lecturing, but as someone who has chosen the asynchronous model, I obviously am falling on the pro-lecturing side, so I'm not really interested in that debate, but I am interested in the idea of creating content that moves away from sort of these pre-recorded slide decks. So what I decided in the summer and have continued doing in the fall is that I really want to create my own lecture series that moves away from the format that I'm actually using right now to actually make something that is more interesting to my general biology lecture students. And I think I really want to put this stuff up on YouTube and have it available to professors and students all across the world. Of course, if I'm going to go with that sort of true OER format, I better make sure that I'm using original materials. And the best way that I can do that is by drawing and recording the materials myself and sort of making this original stuff. So obviously, this needs to be something that I'll want to use in the future because I am putting hours and hours and hours of work into this. So I'll want this to be something that I can use beyond this emergency year. I don't think I'm ever going to be a 100% online teacher, but I do actually think that the flipped classroom is a really solid way to go. So I want these videos I'm making right now to be something that I'm comfortable using in the next 5 to 10 years. And that means that I also want these videos to be something that I'm happy with other professors using and other students at other institutions accessing in the same way my current students are accessing crash course videos. Now, I accepted early on that I'm never going to be as good as the crash course videos. And one of the reasons I know that is because if you actually go on YouTube, they have tutorial videos showing how they do things like this sort of character animation. And I just know that I'm never going to be that much of an expert. However, a lot of the materials on YouTube besides that aren't all that great. So I have a feeling that I can be better than the majority, but not better than sort of this echelon I'm holding myself to, which is the crash course videos. So I have made a number of videos, and I have 3 different formats of them that I'm going to briefly talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and try to stop sharing my PowerPoint again and move to these YouTube videos. So give me a second here, and I'll walk through the different types of videos that I've made so far. So I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to share computer sound. Okay, so let me make this screen a little bit smaller. Okay, the first type of video I've made, I call the comic panel. And in the comic panel, what I'm doing is I'm just drawing with pen and ink and filling a page and then flipping to the next blank page. So I'm going to play a little bit of this video and then hop along to show you what that looks like.
For natural selection and evolution to work on. And evolution, again, is one of my favorite topics in all of biology because it shows how organisms become more adapted to their environment over very long periods of time. So all of this is happening at the cellular level.
Okay, so
quite a few organisms on this planet only have one
where
cell.
I actually
Again, we call
fill a
these
page
single-celled life.
and then
Common
I treat that
examples
page as a
would be
panel,
something like this amoeba
and then I
that you
start the
see
next
here.
page.
This is an
And
organism.
the comic panel is certainly the most dynamic of these formats. The problem is that it never has a lot of proficiency. And that's because I'm kind of live drawing. So this is the first format I did. The second format I did is something called the outline. In the outline, there's a lot more control because I've actually already drawn things in pen and ink, and then I'm filling it in with watercolors. And so this looks kind of cooler because you do get watercolors, although it's less dynamic because you can actually see what's going to happen next. At the same time, I think this ultimately works better because I can apply watercolors where that color adds some degree of organization. So I'm going to show you a little bit more of this video.
Goes for any image you see in your textbook. It's pretty much physically impossible to draw an atom accurately, but to help you learn and get ideas across, these representations basically work. In reality, electrons, protons, and neutrons are not the same size, and electrons don't.
And of course, one of the problems with doing this is that you do have to wait for YouTube to load.
And still have an atom of the same element. Carbon always has to have 6 protons, but you can change.
And then the third type of video I have is something that I call the dissection. This is actually not a drawn video. This is something that I do for my general entomology course. And what I do here is I go ahead and film myself using a microscope, usually using a digital microscope, and then I annotate it after the fact to make some anatomical features clear. So I'll show you a little bit of this video.
Specimen is it shows you a characteristic of the order Hemiptera, which is having a head that is extended into a beak-like mouth part. So there's the head, there's the thorax, and there's the abdomen right there in pink. That's a little bit easier to see in this specimen here.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so again, those were the videos I was showing. The comic panel, the outline where I already have it filled in with ink, and then I'm going to be filling in with watercolor after the fact, and the dissection, which has the most application for my entomology class where they do need to see actual specimens. So the most useful to someone doing an anatomical class. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the creative technique that goes into these videos in case you're interested in doing them yourselves. So the most important thing that I want to do is I want to balance the amount of time that goes into these videos with the amount of time my students have to spend watching them. So for every minute of those recorded YouTube videos, I've estimated that I put about an hour to an hour and a half in production, from drawing to editing to recording the audio. So it is a lot of work to do. So I really want to cut down that 75-minute lecture into a 20 to 25-minute total series of videos where each video is about 6 to 8 minutes long. Something like photosynthesis, which I would usually spend 2 whole lectures on, I have found that if I'm getting down to the basic learning objectives, I can cover that in about 30 minutes of video. And I do this by basically getting rid of all of the fluff that I would have in an in-person class, asking my students to discuss stuff, going through practice problems. That's what adds time to my lectures. It's not that I don't think those things are important. I do think those things are important, but I think they are things that professors should optionally add afterwards in an asynchronous format. So if a professor in Indiana wants to use my photosynthesis videos and then add sort of synchronous discussion components to their online class, that's great. But I think for me, I want to sort of get to these topics as quickly and succinctly as possible and give this good basic outline of how photosynthesis or how atomic structure works. Then I draw the thing, and usually this starts out by drawing on scrap paper, and that scrap paper rarely ends up in the final drawings, but I do need to sort of get a plan of what's going down. I then go ahead and use sort of this non-photo blue color pencil, and this pencil, although we can see it right now, isn't actually something that is caught by the video camera I'm using to record. If I'm going to do the comic panel, I then film myself actually inking, but in something like you're seeing here, this is for the outline. So I go ahead and do the inking before I do the filming. And then when I'm filming, I film myself applying paint. So this is sort of to give you a sense of what that all looks like when I'm setting up. So I have all this ink, and then I'm actually filming myself putting down the watercolor paint itself. So in terms of the technical process, the filming rig that you use is probably the greatest consideration. And you really have to think about your lighting, because it turns out that filming drawings and getting them well lit is actually really challenging. So this was my earliest iteration of my filming rig. So I had this tabletop stand, and I would have these 2 LED panels. And this is a picture I just took today, and this is basically a giant ring light. And I often use this in conjunction with my LED panels. Like I said, that lighting is the hardest thing to get. And during sort of the spring 2020 semester, I first experimented with these sort of cheap USB lighting panels, but ultimately I ended up going with ring lights. And it was actually doing a lot of searching through various artist blogs and YouTube setup videos that I came upon something like this, where you have this giant ring light that other artists were using. So I actually learned how to do all of this stuff from scratch. I had never had any experience filming myself while making art. And honestly, this is just an example of how people in my generation tend to teach themselves stuff from other examples that have been posted. It was because I saw videos like this that I was able to go ahead and make this stuff. By the way, I use a fancy camera with an overhead rig, but there's actually lots and lots of devices that are relatively expensive that allow you to use a cell phone, as opposed to the big camera scaffolding that I use. So I specifically bought a camcorder for this, and now today I tend to use my actual old DSLR Nikon D5100 from about 10 years ago. And then of course you have to use a lot of memory. But honestly, plenty of professors are just using their cell phones for much more simple videos. And there's lots of rigs out there that will actually allow you to just attach your cell phone and to film yourself while you're using it. You don't need to be using sort of this really intense setup that I'm using. And just to give you an idea, this is the rig that I'm using to hold my camera in place. Like I said, you can use this much simpler cell phone carrier, but I actually have this rig that I purchased. And again, I saw this on another video, and what I really like about this rig is that I can actually attach any number of lighting and other panels in the future. It's really fun because for my professional society, the Entomological Society of America, I actually filmed a cooking video where they use cricket powder to make chocolate chip cookies. So this is actually some other cool applications I can use this for in the future, but it's a standard sort of top-down photography rig. So just as a little bit of a reality check, I did spend quite a bit of my own money setting this up, but there are way cheaper versions to do this. So for instance, if you have an iPad or any sort of tablet, you can actually just go ahead and do a screen recording of yourself drawing. If you don't have an iPad, there's certainly $25 to $50 USB connected drawing tablets that will allow you to do the same thing. A lot of my time is spent doing post-processing. So I do a lot of cutting, editing, and more importantly, speeding up my reel speed around 3 to 4 times in Adobe Premiere Pro. So I speed up my drawings to around 300 to 400%. And then my sort of biggest technical challenge is actually getting audio to match up with video. So I am not recording my voice while I'm painting because I do speed up those videos around 3 to 4 times. I'm actually doing a voiceover recording of my own video after the fact. And honestly, getting that video to line up has been the most technically challenging thing. So some sort of final steps and annoyances that I do face in this process. I have to export my media from Adobe Premiere, which is often slow. I have to upload onto YouTube and wait for the HD processing. And then of course, this is covered a little bit in the last lecture. I want my videos to have closed captionings, but because I use lots of complicated biology terms, I often have to edit those videos on YouTube. So should you try this yourself? I think so, yes. But I have a feeling a lot of you in the room are saying, Carly, I can't draw. And I have some possible solutions for you. One, if your school offers any grants that focus on distance learning or improving technology or making lecture materials for OER purposes, this falls under that. I didn't pursue that myself. I just kind of went ahead and did that. But if I was to do this again and think about it more thoroughly, this would be what I would do, looking for those grants and considering hiring a professional. The other thing you can consider doing is that if you have art majors in your school and they're interested in science communication, this could be a really cool way to set up some sort of internship or research for credit. It'd be better if you could pay them. You should always pay your artist, but many of them do have final projects that they have to do. And if they have any interest in science communication, this could be something worth pursuing. Again, paying people is better, but doing work for credit is also okay. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of end it here because I would like to take a question or two, if possible.
Any questions for Carly? I think our jaws are all kind of on the floor right now.
I'm sorry for the technical problems.
Our jaws are on the floor in awe of you right now. I mean, it's impressive.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, has anyone thought about making sort of their own kind of independent of slide lecture recordings?
Hi, Carly. This is Donna Samiel. We have the nursing department that have tried doing things like this. So I'm going to make sure that they watch this this presentation and go in, because a lot of times they were doing stuff where they had to show like a syringe and filling it up and measurements and all that stuff. So it probably would help them to set something up like this. I know they were using an Alamo with a camera on it for a lot of it, but this is great.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of good reason to do this even if you can't draw. So like the dissection videos that I did, that's actually just, I'm hooking up a digital microscope that's only like $100 to my computer and filming in Zoom, looking at insects, and then annotating in Adobe Premiere after the fact. And I think making those sort of videos, especially if you have to do virtual labs, is really cool. The process is kind of the same as what I'm doing in that it's mostly post-processing in some sort of program like Adobe Premiere Pro or Adobe Audition. But yeah, I think there's a lot of applicability here to the sciences.
Yeah, you're just getting a lot of kudos in the chat.
Oh, I didn't even notice there was a chat. Are there questions there I should be looking at?
No questions, but just everyone saying how impressed they were. You know, Ben said he's a former video editor and appreciated seeing all the hard work it takes being acknowledged.
Yeah, the
a lot of time.
the hour and a half for every minute of actual produced video is no joke. And I sort of glossed over this because we were running on time, but honestly, getting my audio to match the action of the video it's like old animation problems, you know, and getting sort of voice of your animators to line up with the action. It's like that. Not as hard, but it's similar.
I think having evergreen content helps, because then you can get a lot of use out of like 1 or 2 videos, right? I would imagine.
Yeah.
If you're teaching like things that change, by the semester, it's a little trickier to sort of justify the investment of time and effort, but
Yeah, and I actually stopped sharing so I can see the chat. Yeah, it's thank you for all the compliments. It's a lot of work, and I think when it's your own material, you're a lot more willing to play around with editing. And to be honest, I didn't know anything about Adobe Premiere or Adobe Audition. I didn't know anything about like mic levels. I accidentally had to unplug my fancy microscope, but here it is right now. And this was a good purchase, even if I was just doing live classes. But yeah, I mean, if anyone has any questions about this, I can throw my email into the chat.
Yeah, that'd be great. And if you could send me your slide deck, I could share that with everybody on the website.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we are at 4, and appreciate you giving us a great last session of the day. We have one more day tomorrow, so I hope to see a lot of you then. And have a good rest of your Thursday, everybody.